It is my pleasure to introduce James Rayton. Having spent the last 4 years working and living in Somalia, Burundi, Rwanda, and Kenya for Save the Children and the UN, James knows more than many the scale of challenges the world faces in global health, security, and development. It's because of this that he signed the 10% giving pledge, and why he's now so delighted to be giving what we can as head of community. James is incredibly passionate about effective giving and growing the community of people who share this philosophy. There will be a Q&A after this talk. You can submit questions in the Swapcard app. If you select this talk on the schedule and press live interaction, then go to the questions tab. You can submit questions and upvote questions. We'll prioritize the most upvoted questions. However, James will also have questions for you at the end of this presentation.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on a Sunday morning as well. I appreciate it. But it's early and it's really good to have you here. For those of you at my talk yesterday, I was kind of focusing on the why of effective giving. So, what was my motivation, and trying to think about, that idea of why. Today is a lot more about the how, and it's a lot more about what we are doing as an organization to try and achieve our goals. And because of that, this is the kind of structure that we're going to follow. So first of all is, what is our vision? And I'll talk you through that very briefly. Our vision is also a kind of a mission statement. So I'll talk through how our vision informs what our kind of North Stars are, so our kind of guiding focuses. From that, I'll then talk about how that informs our key performance indicators. This all sounds a bit dry, but bear with me. Then into our strategic goal, and then finally on our plan for this year to achieve that goal. But what I really appreciate, I'm kind of being a bit cheeky and using this like a bit of a focus group and to pick your brains and to kind of get the most out of you guys, is that I'm going to have some questions for you. So what is it that, are we getting this right, basically? So my question before we get started and my kind of request to you all is, please enjoy the presentation. I hope it's enjoyable, but also if you can kind of have a critical eye when I'm going through this, because I'm going to have some questions for you guys at the end, and I'd really genuinely love to have your feedback on whether we're doing the right things, whether we should be prioritizing other stuff. So if that sounds okay, that'll be awesome. Thank you. So starting with our vision, our vision statement is to create a world in which giving effectively and significantly is a cultural norm. And we want that to be an inspiring thing, but we also think that there are three key elements of this which actually guide how we act and what we're focusing on as an organization. So the first of all is this idea of a cultural norm. We're basically looking to trying to get more people to give in that kind of way, but we're not just talking about incremental small change here. We're talking about a cultural norm. That means that, our practices become the norm around the world, and it's kind of odd if you're not giving significantly to effective causes. That is a huge, bold ambition, right? And we think that's a good thing to have in our vision statement. But that's what we mean when we talk about a cultural norm. This is significant, change on a massive scale, basically. The second one is this idea of significantly. So this is people giving more. I just want to clarify here that we're talking about the percentage that people give, and we're not talking about trying to maximize that. We're not trying to get people to give all of their money away. We're just trying to get them to shift from giving, like, say, the average in the US at the moment is about 2% to maybe thinking about 10%. And so trying to get them to think about giving more, and that's what we mean when we talk about significantly. Maybe that people go higher than that, but actually we found that 10% is about right. It's aspirational. It's a good thing to aim for without it being too kind of burdensome if you're living in the global north. Around 10% works. And then finally, getting more effectively. So here, this is about picking organizations that have the most impact. So yesterday, I was talking about that factor, and actually the most impactful causes, the most impactful organizations often have around 100 times more impact than the average. So trying to get people to give more effectively. And here, this is both in terms of a level of practice, so encouraging people to give more effectively, but then also kind of epistemologically, so helping people to understand what effectiveness is, and through our own research and assessments of evaluators themselves. we don't actually evaluate charities directly. We evaluate evaluators. So we are kind of making sure that the whole of EA is honest and that we're doing quality research and quality evaluations. For example, we do assessments on Goodwell, who they themselves send assessments on organizations. So that's our kind of vision, and then that leads into our North Star, so these guiding focuses that we have, and that is those three things. So more people, giving more, and giving more effectively. Those are the three areas that we are focused on as an organization. And you can actually kind of start thinking about this on a graph, right? And we can plot these different areas. So increasing any one of those vectors, so getting people to give more efficiently, getting more people to give, or getting them to give more, increases that volume of a box here that you can see on the screen. And that kind of represents the amount of money that is going to people who need it, which is the underlying purpose of what effective giving is all about, right? And the impact that we can generate that way. So if we model givers on the x-axis, percentage of giving on the y, then we can start to use that. And then we'll also add in this coefficient on the z-axis, which is the effectiveness. So we can go from 0 to 1. Just a caveat here that I'm not saying that giving to ineffective causes has no impact at all, but just for the sake of this modeling, let's say, Give Well's recommendations, Giving What We Can's recommendations, we would say they have an effectiveness of 1. Whereas, I don't know, I've given some examples here that, other organizations, other causes, I've given them a 0. It's not that easy, and it's definitely not a binary kind of position like that, but for the sake of this modeling, that's what we've gone for here. So let's look at Rachel. Rachel is a typical US donor. So in the US, which is the low tax economy, and it's important to remember that, the average giving is around 2%. So Rachel is kind of typical in that respect. And here in this example, she's giving $250, so 25% of her giving is going to the Against Malaria Foundation, and $750 to the local animal shelter, which we've given an efficiency at 0. Again, take that with a pinch of salt, but that's where they are. So that gives her a coefficient of 0.25. So that's her box. That's her kind of total value that we're saying is going to effective causes and to people who need that help. Look at Jessica. So in this example, she's on a Giving What We Can trial bed. She's donating 5% of her income away. And most of that is going to identifiably effective causes. So 0.75 here, where we're getting 25% is still going to the local church, which again, in this case, we're giving a rating of 0. So that gives her a bigger box. She's got a bigger volume here that's going to causes that we think are the most efficient and the most effective and having the biggest impact. And then finally, you've got Tim. So Tim's the kind of ideal Giving What We Can pledger, 10%, been doing it since 2016 and goes 100% with recommended organizations. And that for us is the kind of ideal, nice big volume there. That's how we're kind of viewing these North Stars. That's how we think about, our community and what we're trying to aim to get. And that informs KPIs. So here are the three kind of areas that we look at each of those. On the left, you've got the kind of number of pledges or number of donors. And that's thinking about the number of people, basically, so that x-axis. In the middle, you've got the percentage of giving, so trying to encourage people to give a little bit more. So thinking about taking a 10% pledge or even more than that and progressing people through those stages, or the amount of giving that they have. So trying to get people to give bigger donations. And then on the final one, which is the kind of z-axis, you've got the efficiency of people's giving. So that's trying to encourage people to give more efficiently, but it's also reporting that. For us, it's really great when we get people who are pledging who can then report that data. So who are they pledging to on our site? Because it allows us to show what our impact is and think about that, and also report to our donors and all of that kind of stuff. Of these, in 2024, we are focusing pretty heavily on lifetime pledges. So we've not sidelined the rest, but we are doing this. We're conducting research, whatever else. But as an organization, Giving What We Can is focusing heavily on lifetime pledges. So those KPIs have informed our strategic goal for 2024, which is to get 10,000 10% pledges by the end of the year. That's how we've got to this thinking. But the reason that we've gone for that, for this area particularly, and not to the exclusion of the rest, but the reason we prioritize this is for a few reasons. First of all is this idea of upstream positioning. So the success flows from here. By increasing the number of lifetime pledges, we also get an increase in the number of people giving generally, because we're out talking about the pledge, talking about the ideas that underpin the pledge. It increases the relative percentage of people giving, increases the average efficiency of people giving, and the total donation volume. So we think it's a good thing for the kind of other side effects that it has and the upstream positioning that it has for us. And attempting to increase lifetime pledges also increases the number of trial pledges, first-time givers, and also things like traffic to our website. So we think it's a really good thing for us to be doing in that respect. Second of all, we think there's good secondary effects, so general public awareness and cause area awareness, so promoting the ideas of, zinc supplementation, AI, safety, nuclear catastrophe aversion, all of this kind of stuff, because we're talking about pledging, all of the things that are in that. And it also kind of, it spreads a really positive vibe, I think, around effective altruism. So the last couple of years, EA has had some bad press, but I think a lot of people are aware of in this room. But this is a really positive story, we think. Getting 10,000 people to pledge 10% of their income would be an amazing kind of PR story for us as an organization, but also as a movement to be doing this kind of stuff. So we think there's good kind of secondary effects as well. This is the kind of the key one. So we think the x-axis here is the most scalable. So it's actually really hard to get anywhere. So if you think about the z-axis, for example, the maximum is 1, so 100% efficiency. So if we can get people to give all of their 10% to the most effective causes, that's it. It maxed out. That's a really great thing, but we can't go any further than that because there are ceilings to how impactful you can be for your donation. Likewise, on the y-axis, people could give 100%, but that's both unrealistic and actually it's not something we want to do. We don't want to push people too far, push them into kind of financial situation that they're not comfortable with or that actually going to then cause them harm. So we don't push that too far. But the x-axis, we can just keep going, for a long, long way. Like hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people here could be giving, 10% of their income away or significantly more of their income. So that's why we think focusing on new pledges is a really good thing for us to be doing. We also have good evidence of success. So we know people stick to it. If people sign a 10% pledge, because it is a serious commitment, and we don't push people, we don't kind of sales this too much. We want it to be an organic thing that people really commit to, and we want that to mean something. We don't want people to kind of sign up on a whim. It needs to be a serious, considered decision before you do a 10% pledge. So people tend to stick to it. We also know that over the course of people's lifetime, they tend to give more and give more effectively over that time. So may sign a 10% pledge and have a kind of give most of it to effective organizations, but over the course of their pledge life, it tends towards giving all of their donations to effective causes, and they also tend to give more as they earn more, but also some people start giving an increased percentage as well. And also, as an organization within EA, giving what we can as one of the highest multipliers, so sort of impact multipliers. We have tentative studies back in 2022 that showed we have a kind of 30x multiplier. So for dollars given direct to us as an organization, we're then able to generate 30 times that for impactful causes. That's what we think is most accurate. We actually talk around 10% to be really conservative on that. But actually, our best estimate is around 30%, and that is in our impact assessment for 2022 that we did on what our impact can be. So that's kind of argument for Meta, argument for supporting EA as a cause area itself, is that it does drive funding towards effective causes. And then finally, this idea that we can quantify the value, which is kind of what I was saying. So from 12 years of data, our best guess is that each giving what we can 10% pledger generates around $100,000 for effective causes and over their lifetime. So that means that if we can get to 10,000 people, we're looking at about $1 billion going to effective organizations. That's awesome. And so that's why we're focusing on that as an area. Our kind of bigger long-term strategy for us as an organization is to get to 1 million. So that is, our big, hairy, audacious goal. Right now we're looking at 10,000, but that 10,000 represents $1 billion. So being able to quantify that is a really nice thing for us, and it shows our impact and it shows what we're kind of able to focus on. So that then needs to, now we've got that gone, how are we going to go about doing it? So this is where I really like kind of your feedback as an audience. What do you think? And it's really about this funnel. So this is our kind of funnel for how we get people into this idea of effective giving. So at the top, you've got awareness. So for example, I've heard about the 10% pledge. I know what it is. A lot of people don't. The vast majority of people do not know what this is. I'm talking about the general public. Taking people from awareness to then being aligned to it. So saying, I think this is a good idea. I think this is something that, people should do. Being aligned with us as an organization. To then taking action. This is a big step. Saying, I'm aware of it. I think it's a good idea, but actually I'm now going to act on those beliefs. So taking a 10% pledge is a big step. And then this is the one that I've started doing recently, and the kind of latest step on my journey is then advocating for others to take the pledge as well. So that's to find that kind of bottom there of the commitment level. It's also worth saying that this isn't always necessarily linear. I know people advocate on the pledge before they take it themselves, all of that. But, this is roughly what we're looking at in terms of our flow, this funnel. The challenge for us is, how do we get more people into the funnel? So how do we get more people aware of it? And how do we get them through this process quicker? It often takes years. A lot of people working for Giving What We Can were first aware back in sort of 2015, and then took the pledge in sort of 2021, and then only recently started advocating for it. I first heard about the pledge in 2009, and only signed in 2020. So how can we kind of increase the speed that people are able to go through this funnel as well? We're going to focus on 4 areas. So this is where I really love your kind of feedback. Are we focusing on the right areas to achieve our goal? So the first is peer-to-peer advocacy. We've got this 9,000 plus network of people who've taken a 10% pledge. They are ultra motivated. If you are prepared and committed enough to give 10% of your income away, we think that those people could be really great advocates, and we want to activate them. So basically, we want to take them from the action to the advocacy level. And try and get them to kind of push through and maybe bring on 1 or 2 other people to sign a 10% pledge. But that's really hard, right? Taking someone from a private, personal thing that they've done to themselves to then being very open about that and even kind of advocating for it with people they're close with is a hard thing to do. But we think that's a good area for us to focus on. The second is kind of higher profile Giving What We Can pledges. So this is Ali Abdal. Last week he did a video for us, actually not sponsored by us. It's completely kind of his off his own back, which was awesome. But saying that he's committed to a company pledge of 10% on top of his own commitment to give 10% of his income away. It's a great video, and we've seen that already pushing pledges towards Giving What We Can, and seeing people taking the pledge as a result of that. Next, we have partners. So One for the World promote a 1% pledge. We have partnered with them. So for example, if I find that some of their community is saying, actually, I think I could do more than 1%, they then send them to us, basically, which is great. So there's a bit of a connection within EA on how you can promote and be a good partner with others on around the pledge. And then finally, we've kind of added this bucket, which we called low-hanging fruit, which is basically you guys coming to events like this. So people who are already kind of aware of what EA is, what Giving What We Can is, coming to events like this and being another touch point. So being another chance to engage, talk to people about, where they are on that funnel, and what their kind of blockers might be, what they kind of feel they need to kind of take a step forward and get to a stage where they'll be comfortable either signing the 10% pledge or then advocating for others to do that. So these are roughly the 4 areas that we focused on. My questions for you guys are, firstly, do you agree? Are we focusing on the right things? Should we be thinking about the percentage that people give? Are we right to be focusing on trying to get more people to give the 10% pledge? Should we be looking at other areas, basically? What are we missing? So are there things that other areas that we should be focusing on? What are the other ways we could grow our movement beyond those kind of 4 areas that I discussed of peer advocacy, kind of high profile members, low hanging fruit, and partners kind of recommendations? What needs dropping? So is one of those going to be a waste of our time? Should we stop trying to get influencers to do videos for us? What from your experience is a good, impactful way for us to grow a movement? And then finally, anything else? Did I stop and just go home and do something else? Yeah, I'll pause there. I really genuinely appreciate any comments you might have or thoughts from your own reflections within EA, within your own roles, building communities, talking to friends, your experience with giving. So I'll pause down.
Curious as to what type you will tapping in more, or like you a bishop couples?
Yeah, that's a great question. So 10% has cultural connotations. So obviously tithing, we've been speaking about this quite a lot. Zakat, sadaqah, religious giving often talks about 10%. So that's another reason that we've kind of gone in that level. In terms of defining people that we've found most engaged with this, a lot of it has been due to our kind of origins in academic circles. So it started off in Oxford in 2009, a guy called Toby Ord. And so we found a lot more traction with kind of philosophically engaged individuals with this idea of giving and why you might want to do that. And then more recently, I think as kind of EA has grown, we've kind of moved into this area that's sort of basically people who are like really interested in topics like AI safety and nuclear catastrophe, whatever else it might be. So people who are kind of maybe worried about some of these global issues and have a background in that, who have then entered EA for different reasons. We're then seeing that a lot of them are sort of showing an interest in giving as well as part of their lifestyle. What we haven't really done, and something I'm interested in, is kind of moving into like what I would call a mass market. So we're not doing paid ads. We're not as much going out to giving workplace talks or whatever else, because historically that's not actually been a great return for us. So yeah, we're kind of in a fairly small pool, I would say, at the moment.
And just the poll is helpful. Like, so when you target influencers, are you targeting influential individuals or one of these are in those circles? Like,
yeah, so these guys are kind of outside. Yeah, that's a great point. So we kind of talk about proto-8, so people who are already aware of active altruism. So Ali Abdal was actually living, sharing a flat with someone who was working on the LED's exposure project. So that was his introduction to EA. We then knew that he'd kind of taken a pledge and he promoted that. Since then, his YouTube following is significantly grown. And so we've kind of been able to talk to him. But so it's kind of people who are aware of EA already, but have this larger following that we've been focusing on. We're not, for example, so Give Directly I've recently released a video with Mr. Beast, and huge followership. It was a great video. It was really, really good thing for them to do. He's the biggest YouTuber by kind of followers, whatever else. We haven't taken that approach. We haven't been actively reaching out to these big kind of influencers. We are beginning to do that, and Grace, the head of marketing, is doing a lot of that work as well. But a lot of it has been people who are already tangentially aware of effective altruism and giving what we can. Don't you think? Yeah.
you want to go back to?
No, yeah. Well, I haven't had your question. No, I had not. So, yeah, sorry. So, how do we give what we can donors rate their satisfaction with their various experience do they get sufficient validation about the impact they're making?
Yeah, good point. We get very few people de-pledge. So once people pledge, they tend to be very happy with this support again. We are very intentional about that. So part of my role is to kind of look after our community, make sure that if they have any questions, that we're able to answer them and support them. Yeah, so hopefully that answers that. Yeah, we do get some people sort of step off and are not able to do that. Also, like a lot of people who make the pledge don't actually end up following through on it, but we account for that in our kind of calculations and everything else as well. Yeah. And you had another question?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what does giving what we can do to facilitate the ledgers kind of like interacting with each other? Have you set up like an online platform where they can talk like potentially the daily and like?
Yeah, we do. We actually have one in Toronto as well. I don't know if you're based here or not, Andrew. Okay, Montreal. Yeah, in fact, Alex Burke runs our Toronto kind of group. So we do try and organize kind of like EA groups, basically. In fact, Giving What We Can groups came first, and then EA kind of subsumed them, and now we've started again having these Giving What We Can groups, which are focused on effective giving. They're in 10 cities around the world. We are looking to expand that this year, and my role is to kind of support people like Alex who are volunteering, giving their time to support and set up these groups. And that's really a chance for you to kind of socialize with other people who have made this commitment, but also what I'm hoping to do is to activate those groups into being advocates as well. So that they have that kind of support network behind you, and you can then go out and talk about it, or bring a friend to that evening and have a talk from someone about effective giving, have a chat about it afterwards, that kind of stuff. So there are organizations locally. If you're interested in setting one up as well, follow the links on the website. You can go under their kind of volunteering section there and think about setting up a kind of Giving What We Can group.
Yeah, I think thinking about the strategic direction that you were asking Brainput on is I saw a number, I think, this weekend that the total grand number of effective altruists, people who are consider themselves EAs, is something like 7,000 or something like that. And to get 10,000 donors, like, okay, does that mean that some EAs, some 10%ers aren't EAs? Like, that sounds like that number seems wrong, first of all.
Yeah.
So there's definitely more than 7,400 EAs. We're getting up to that number. But I want to kind of like ask you about your thoughts or your reaction to it is like beyond, and like, yes, that x-axis, I agree, is like, that's the axis. That I think was, excuse me, Becky, is this better? The axis of like getting more donors, that's the axis. I think you're right on that. And that number, I would like to see it include people who don't really care about BA as a community, as a movement, as a thought. To do that, you would have to get like effective giving into daily life. And so I guess something I've been thinking about is how do consumers of services and products, when they buy things, like get money to use profits that could be directed to good causes. Has Giving What We Can considered worked towards getting in like a label on a cereal bar or things along those lines, where services and products are profits go towards picking cherries?
Yeah. It's a great point. If I could maybe address the first point once, because I was also here with that sort of 7,000 number was put out. So I agree, as in I may well be wrong, which is a good thing, and it'd be nice if it was more than that. One caveat I would say is that a lot of people who are kind of effective givers wouldn't necessarily kind of brand themselves as effective altruists. I think there is this kind of slight fissure within EA of people who are like focused on giving and maybe like don't necessarily engage with the subject matter of like AI safety or whatever else in quite the same way that a lot of the EA audience does. I don't think that's a great thing, to be honest. I think they should be more concretely one part, and I think effective giving should be a kind of fundamental foundational part of effective altruism. And I said that in my speech yesterday. I think it's great if you want to set up an organization working on, animal welfare or whatever else, and it's a really wonderful thing. But that shouldn't preclude giving, a percentage of your income away to effective causes. And, that's what I do. I work in an EA. I still keep that commitment. So that's one point. And then on the kind of cause-related marketing sort of thing, it's an interesting one, and probably something I will take away and have a chat with the team about. Is this something we want to do? We have to the reason that we focused on this one area is because the last couple of years we were kind of trying to do everything and not doing it that well. So we've really focused now in on trying to get pledges. But perhaps this is something we could do, some kind of cause-related marketing. Have you thought about a 10% pledge? Follow this QR code, something like that might be something we could explore. But yeah, I will take that away. I had a chat with the team. It's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Just in relation to that, as someone who runs the for-profit company, I've been considering the idea of finding a way to, like, as a really good kind of example, Tom's shoes. The idea of your purchase with a company, knowing that purchase is going to lead to the profits going to some effective endeavor. I've been thinking about how to use the 10% pledge as like a marketing thing for the business to make it more palatable for my business partner and in general. But the idea of like that thing on the label being not necessarily just like, have you considered effective giving or this QR code, but also like, by buying this, you are effective give it.
Yeah.
Great. And like, I definitely do think that there's space for that somewhere.
I think that's awesome. I think that's a great idea. So we have, I think we're approaching 100 company pledges. So companies give 10% of profits to effective causes. But why not kind of use that as a marketing technique, right? Like, yeah, totally. And also like, this is not new. This is a well tried and tested approach for businesses to sell their products, right? There is an ethical consumer base that is really growing across Canada, across the global north. People want to know that they're buying ethical products increasingly. So why not sort of do an amazing thing, give 10% of the profits away, but also use that to drive more profits, grow the pie. I think it's a really good thing to do. I think it's a really great idea. And also, if you are thinking about doing that and you'd like some wording, we can help to kind of craft that with it.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool.
Can I get those same thing?
I wonder how, like, what is the percentage of people who signed the 10% directly or a trial, like lower than 10%? I wonder if for groups that have not been very involved with giving, if talking more about a trial would make them come on board either.
That's a very good idea. So around 20% of people who take a trial pledge then go on to take a 10% pledge. And at the moment, because it's temporary, it's not a lifetime thing, but around 1,000 people on trial pledges at the moment. It's also an easier ask. Like One for the World asks for 1%, and they find it quite easy to sign people up. Like at events like this, you can sit in a foyer and say, come on, try 1%. It's quite an easy ask. 10% is a lot harder, especially for a lifetime commitment. So, yeah, I agree. I think it should be something we are more focused on. I think I guess the question is, if you have that 20% conversion rate, are we going to get 5 times as many people to take up trial pledges as we would do getting people to do 10%? And I think that is the not so sure question we have. And at these conferences, we've been pushing for trial pledges rather than 10%, because you can set your percentage, so it could be 1%, and we feel more comfortable as an organization doing that. If people want to sign 10% pledge at the conference, that's awesome, and we'll show them how to do that, but we're not going to kind of promote that in the same way we would a trial pledge. So yeah, I think it's a really good point, basically, and it's something we're going to be looking at next year is where do we shift the focus? Has this been successful to do? Going in the deep end basically at 10%. And there's a long tail as well. So the final point, like from your first going through that funnel, takes a while. Like it's often, there are some people who are just like, yeah, that makes sense, I'll sign up. But a lot of people need multiple exposures to EA and to giving what we can before they're going to give that kind of donation. Hey, yeah.
So I'm just an outsider here, so like I'll probably say some wrong people. Like so it seems like the legit tactics and the messaging is very much like an appeal to rationality, and the messaging very convincing. But I think what I've found from was, what I've found from just cursory research about like donating and stuff is that I think people first and foremost give emotionally, and so that, and which is why you see like at least with U.S. data, like most donors are religious donors, like they give to their local parish or something. And then I've even like just briefly like spoken to people who I know are motivated by donating effectively, and something they say is that they know that they rationally it's the right thing to do, but they don't feel that satisfied because they just go to the donation checkout box and it comes out and then they don't see much like feedback. So I think like I'm not saying to like just take it like put like fireworks and bells and whistles and everything, but is there something that Giving What We Can is doing to like appeal to that emotionality or kind of like visualize the impact that you make like very instantly?
Yeah, it's a great point. Culturally, we don't have that. Like, frankly, I think EA as a culture does not do that. Where like we don't do the whole. Let me tell you a story. So I was working for Save the Children before I moved to Kenya in 2019. But before that, I was working in our London office, and we conducted a bit of research with Plan International around fundraising, and we basically looked at images in our kind of donor communications, and we found that a single photo of a child, not in distress, so it's like a smiling child, raised significantly more money than if we didn't have that image. Like really, it was shocking. So basically, you're absolutely right. Like people do donate emotionally, and like having that human connection is really important. We don't do that at Giving What We Can. EA doesn't do that. I mean, my presentation yesterday, I had one photo of a refugee camp, but there were no people in there. And actually the bulk of my presentation was graphs and statistics and whatever else. So I think there is an area for that. And that's, to be honest, that's something I am quite interested in us doing, particularly if we move out of this EA funding group into mass market. But we need to be careful, right? Because there are real problems with sort of problematizing the global south, or just going too far that way. Basically, I think there are real problems with that. And in the 70s, the kind of like skeletal children and really kind of pulling it in bigger spaces, that is not where we want to be going. But we need to find the right balance, I think.
Maybe I'll qualify the like question a little bit better. By emotion, I don't necessarily. I agree. Like, yeah, we're gonna try like shock or appeal to tragedy as it there. I was actually thinking more along the lines of making the numbers and statistics more visually appealing, so that people can visualize that a bit easier. And so they're still motivated by the rationality of it. It's just they can see their impact in some sort of visual form.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think so on that one, I think we are actually getting better at that. So again, my presentation is one of the infographics we have is like a difference that you can have with different interventions, and that I think is quite visually arresting. I don't know, maybe people are like, yes, they might not necessarily agree, but we try and kind of show, rather than just numbers, different infographic stats on how we do that. So I think we are getting better at that. And also, I think our website is pretty good for that, honestly. And again, really welcome feedback, but we try to be a bit more kind of interesting in how we present those. Basically, the level of difference you can have, particularly between giving from the average charity to the most effective ones, like that is a really steep curve, and we're quite visual around that, I think. But I do think, sorry to go back to the previous question, I agree. I think we do need to be a bit more emotive and a bit more open about that. I think it's important.
Just on that, I know GiveWell had a big impact in there was a big basic income evening here last year, and GiveWell did like maybe a 5-minute presentation, not problematizing but showing the impact. I think Kenya was one of the communities in Kenya what the community was focused on, and it was hugely impactful. A lot of people here, because you're crossing that divide between people just not knowing and like raising in this problem. I have a question around just you might help in terms of input from the 2%. That's the average. What are people should? Do you have any insights into how they're shifting that disposable income? Like where is that extra 8% coming from to get to the 10%?
Sure. So what do you sacrifice in order to? Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know, to be honest. Like I think often it's a kind of reduction in savings or changes in lifestyle, but actually changes in lifestyle are fairly limited. And if you think you've got a 10% pay rise in a new role, what do you spend that money on? It's that kind of thing in reverse, basically. So what is it that you're foregoing through that? So it's hard to give an answer in terms of people are different and people make different sacrifices. But yeah, the way I like to think about that is what would you do if you got a 10% pay rise, and then kind of inverting that the other way. Like what would you do if you got a new job where you were paid 10% less?
So contextualizing that, what I imagine might be worth exploring in terms of the impact. Like so, getting 10%, like going from what you are now to whatever, like hypothesizing what that looks like, especially with like giving up concert tickets or something where it's from somebody's disposable income. So, and then connecting that, as you were saying, like emotively to the impact side might make it the connection, like in terms of your acceleration path.
Yeah, that's a good point. I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I think maybe we can make more of that and showing, and also perhaps showing because one thing I wanted to do there was kind of show, not to trivialize what 10% might feel like for you, but because some people like 10% is actually really hard or impossible. Like if you are at a stage in your life where you've got young kids, or you've got a very mortgage, or you've just been made unemployed, or whatever else, like 10% is not that achievable. If you're in a position where 10% is actually like fairly manageable, you might then be able to kind of say, oh, do you need a bigger TV, or do you need a nice tailored suit? And comparing what that money could do in low resource settings. So if you're living in Burundi, or wherever else, and GiveWell's recommendation that it's between $4,500 to $6,000 can save the human's life fairly concretely, like confidently they can say that. Making that comparison, I think, is a really powerful thing to do and say, do you want to have a new bigger TV or a new car, or do you want to say, try and, fairly confidently say that you've saved 3 people's lives? Pretty hard hitting though, and I think we've got to be really tricky because it then leads to a question of like, okay, where do I draw the line? And that is a tricky conversation. We don't want people to be so paralyzed by that kind of moral quandary that they don't do anything, which often happens. Is they just like, oh, I'm not sure where to go the line, I'm not going to do anything. Ali Abdal talks about that actually. It's kind of saying like, I agonized with this for a long time and ended up doing nothing, and now I've decided actually 10% is really good, I'm just going to do that.
Maybe it's a bit of a tangent, but this is something that I've heard in effective altruism so many years, this phrase, saving a life. And I just want to hear, like, you're showing this one, that, or maybe it's just somebody. It just feels the elephant in the room for me personally in the EA. It's like, to save, like, maybe I'm a step of precision, prevent a preventable death, extending a certain person's lifetime by a certain number of years. Like, I think I Googled what ANF is doing, or I felt just unsatisfied with this phrase, saving a life. Yeah. When you say it, James, what is it into?
Yeah. You know what? If Shea, our head of research, was in the ring, he'd be kind of cheering for you, I think. Well, yeah, I think it's tricky. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a turn of phrase for me, which is useful and simplifies what is actually a fairly complex issue. So, and again, when they distribute it, or when AMF distributes nets, some of it is preventable deaths. So it's some of those nets are not going to be used. Some of them are going to be used, but people wouldn't have died anyway. So it's not having any impact. So it is completely preventable deaths. It is an oversimplification, I think, or a very complex issue. If we're trying to convey a message to a mass market quickly, then I think we then start, do we want to go into that kind of logic and rigmarole and caveats every single time we talk about this? And so that is the reason that I use that phrase, I suppose. But yeah, it is problematic, and you're right to flag that.
Related to that, maybe in the wrong direction, but I one thing that strikes me about doing what we can is the strength is this lifetime pledge. Is you have people who are in the door for a lifetime, and there's potential there to engage with people over longer periods than just years that you did last year. And I mean, I'm a sucker for the AMS dashboard to give me numbered nets, and I know it is problematic, and I know all that, but my silly brain loves that stuff, loves seeing the graph and everything. And I just wonder if there's a way to somehow leverage the lifetime aspect in terms of working with people to help understand what this lifetime pledge has meant, and having that as a way to get people in the door, as a way to aggregate information. But yeah, it's not a fully formed path.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And yeah, I suppose what that makes me think about is this peer-to-peer advocacy point. Like, can we create a real, part of creating cultural norm is to create a kind of sense of community. And that's why I think the job that Alex does in Toronto, and the job that, like our trustees do, and the community of people we pledge do, like all of that, creating a real community of people who are really committed to this, is something who what we want to try and weaponize isn't the right, operationalize it, and get those people really kind of passionate and active in terms of growing our community. It can't just be our staff. There's only 12 of us, right? Like, and of that, there's only me who's doing this kind of work. So it needs to be something we do as a community, and particularly, as you say, if you made a lifetime commitment, that's a really big thing, and it's something that I would really love to see people connecting with other people who've made that commitment, because I think that's a really strong social bond. So I agree, basically. And I one thing I need to think about, I'm new in the role, one thing I need to think about is how we can really operationalize that and make sure that people have the opportunities to do that. And I think particularly Alex and the role that volunteer leaders are going to be playing is really important. That this is great, by the way. Thank you so much. This is also
Sorry, quick one. I'm SK from RC Forward. Some of you might be going to a EA Canada retreat later. I'm actually going to run a session and share some ideas, because we've been trying to get donations at RC Forward for quite a while now, and I think James will be there. Yeah, and we can continue some of these conversations. I had to go. I have a 1-1 now, but there's also a lot of knowledge that I can share about some of the donors' experience, at least in Canada. And if you're not going to the retreat tomorrow, I guess I'll try and hang out as much in James' booth, and then we can keep the conversation going and have like a lot of things to share as well. And ideally, I want to like brainstorm more ideas such as these ones that you guys are sharing, so that it can increase pledges and donations. But I gotta go now. Oh, sorry I interrupted you.
well, thank you. That's great.
How are we gonna like the bowler?
You probably already started thinking about this, but I don't know where I got this statistic from, but correct if I'm wrong, but I found that I think a bulk of donor funds come from actually middle to middle higher income classes in like developed countries. But we're actually finding that the ultra rich actually don't give as much as like middle income people. So
In terms of a percentage,
oh, is it absolute or like percentage or? Okay, percentage. All right.
yeah.
Okay. Well, so
Yeah. Well, potentially both as well. If you look at how many people are in that kind of
middle income bracket and how much they give, that I'm not quite sure.
yeah. Okay, I guess then maybe just if my numbers are not correct, then yeah. My question was are there different messaging tactics to kind of like
well, so and there are different organizations as well looking at the kind of an ultra high net worth, so kind of multi-million billionaires. So for example, I think it's Giving Pledge a focus on billionaires and trying to get them to give away the majority, so 50% or more of their wealth before they die. So, and it's because of that reason actually that we focused on this cultural norm approach rather than going after the people who have the most money, because there are already organizations doing that, and our marginal value, we think, comes in this idea of trying to create a cultural norm of giving, and that's where Giving What We Can's niche is. That was my question actually when I was doing the interviewing, is like, why aren't we talking to millionaires and billionaires? And the response is actually like, others are doing this, this is where we think EAGxToronto goes to go here.
So we're actually a tie for this room, but James has office hours immediately in High Park, which is upstairs, so we can continue the conversation there. And thank you very much, James.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I do really, that's a good session. Thank you.